There are prayers heaven cannot ignore, words that shake the gates of lack and summon provision from unseen realms. When you pray these 7 financial prayers, you won't just be asking for money, you'll be aligning yourself with divine laws that command increase. Because prosperity isn't a mystery, it's a covenant. And once you understand the covenant, lack will lose your address forever. There's a realm of prayer where results aren't delayed, where heaven responds not in years but in moments. Many have prayed for finances and wondered, why hasn't it happened for me? But the truth is, it's not that God hasn't answered, it's that many haven't prayed the kind of prayer He can answer. Tonight, I want to take you into the heart of divine provision. I want to show you 7 financial prayers. Not emotional cries, not desperate pleas, but kingdom decrees that heaven always honors. These prayers don't just move money, they move you into divine alignment. Because hear me, beloved, God doesn't respond to need, He responds to faith. Need doesn't move heaven, covenant does. And when your prayer life becomes covenant-based, your days of lack are over. I've seen people pray for years, fast for days, sow seeds without understanding, and still struggle. But when revelation comes, everything changes. Tonight, if you'll stay with me, I'll show you how to pray in a way that commands answers. Because when your spirit catches these 7 financial prayers, your finances will never remain the same. You're about to learn prayers that shift atmospheres, silence the devourer, and unlock hidden provision. So don't just listen, receive. Because by the time we finish, you'll know exactly how to pray prayers God cannot ignore. Everything God does begins with recognition of who He is. Before He becomes your provider, He must be your source. You cannot call Him Jehovah Jireh and still depend on the system of this world to feed you. The moment your eyes turn from men to God, heaven begins to respond. Many pray for money, but they never shift their faith. They are still expecting their job, their friend, their family, or a loan to be the answer. But when a man truly believes God is his source, he disconnects from the limited and connects to the unlimited. That is the first doorway to supernatural supply. God never intended for His people to live under the pressure of lack, but He did intend for them to live under the authority of trust. The prayer of covenant alignment begins with surrender. It is not the prayer of asking, it is the prayer of repositioning your heart. It sounds like this: Father, you are my source, not my bank, not my business, not my paycheck, not man. Everything I have comes from you. When you pray like that, you shift from human dependence to divine dependence. God cannot fill what man is already supplying. But the moment you release your grip on the natural, you open your hands to the supernatural. Heaven begins to move the instant you decide that only God can take the glory for your provision. It is written that when Abraham lifted his eyes to the mountain, he saw the ram already caught in the thicket. The provision was already there, but he could not see it until he looked up. That is the essence of covenant alignment, looking up. Many keep their eyes on the earth, watching prices rise, economies fall, and markets shake. But faith looks higher. Faith sees that there is a supply already prepared before the need ever arose. The prayer of covenant alignment causes your spirit to look beyond the visible and tap into the invisible storehouse of heaven. When you begin to pray like that, the atmosphere around your finances begins to shift. God told Israel that He would give them power to get wealth that He may establish His covenant. Notice, He did not say, so they may live comfortably. He said that He may establish His covenant. That means financial provision is not primarily for pleasure, it is for purpose. The moment your heart aligns with that covenant purpose, increase is inevitable. God funds what carries His name. He releases resources into the hands of those who understand stewardship. And the prayer of covenant alignment is what brings you into that place of divine trustworthiness. When you begin to pray from this revelation, you stop trying to manipulate outcomes. You don't have to beg, because sons don't beg, they believe. You stop worrying about how, and you start resting in who. You begin to see that everything in your life flows from the covenant. The breath you breathe, the health in your body, the ideas in your mind, the favor on your path. All of it is a reflection of His covenant faithfulness. When you pray, Lord, align my heart with your covenant, you are asking Him to adjust everything in you that resists His supply. It is a prayer that breaks pride because pride says, I can do it. But covenant says, hey, already did it. Faith cannot operate in a divided heart. That is why so many believers live between two systems. They trust God on Sunday but trust the world on Monday. Covenant alignment means your faith stays fixed. You no longer look at the circumstances, you look at the covenant. When the bills come, you say, I am in covenant with Jehovah Jireh. When the job ends, you say, my source never dries up. When the economy shakes, you say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That is not denial, that is alignment. It is setting your mind to agree with heaven, even when the earth disagrees. In this prayer, you are not trying to convince God to give. You are convincing your heart to receive, because the covenant is already established. The moment Jesus shed his blood, the terms were sealed. Everything you will ever need was secured in that covenant. But it is possible to live under covenant and still experience lack if your heart is out of alignment. A car out of alignment cannot move straight, and a believer out of covenant alignment cannot move in blessing. The prayer of covenant alignment puts you back on the path of divine order. Many times, before God releases the abundance, He tests the heart. He checks the motives. He allows situations that expose where your trust truly lies. That delay you are facing might not be punishment, it might be preparation. God wants to ensure that your trust is not in the gift, but in the giver. The moment you prove that your eyes are fixed on Him alone, doors that were locked will begin to open. The heavens will release ideas, favor, and connections you did not even pray for, because alignment attracts provision. When you kneel to pray this prayer, you must strip away every form of entitlement. You are not praying from greed, but from faith. You are not asking for more to show off, but to show forth His glory. And in that posture of humility, heaven takes notice. God can do more with a surrendered heart than 1,000 strategies. When you align your covenant position, your prayers gain power, because now you are not praying as a beggar at the gate, but as an heir in the kingdom. You are not praying from the outside looking in. You are praying from the inside, enforcing what already belongs to you. Every time you declare, Lord, you are my source, you are dethroning the spirit of mammon. You are refusing to bow to fear and lack. You are declaring independence from the world's economy and dependence on heaven's economy. And heaven has no shortage. The streets are paved with gold to remind you that what men chase, God walks on. So when you align with Him, you begin to walk on what others are chasing. That is the power of covenant alignment. You must also understand that this prayer is continuous. It's not a one-time declaration, it's a lifestyle. Every day, you bring your thoughts back to the covenant. Every time you face a financial challenge, you remind your soul that God has sworn by Himself to take care of you. The more you pray from that place, the stronger your faith becomes. You begin to notice provision showing up in unexpected ways. Opportunities start finding you. Ideas begin to flow. Divine timing aligns because your spirit has locked into the source. When the widow in the time of famine obeyed the word and gave her last meal, she aligned herself with the covenant of provision. The supply did not stop flowing. As long as her obedience stayed in place, her miracle stayed in motion. That is what happens when your heart and faith come into covenant alignment. Your resources become sustained by heaven's economy. So when you pray, don't pray like one who is desperate. Pray like one who knows. Pray from revelation. Speak with assurance, Father, I am yours and you are my source. I refuse to fear. I refuse to depend on man. I refuse to bow to lack. I align myself with your covenant of abundance. My supply comes from above. Everything I need is already prepared. And as you keep declaring that, the invisible will begin to manifest. The heavens respond to alignment, because alignment is faith in its purest form. Obedience is the master key that unlocks divine provision. It is the invisible bridge between prayer and manifestation. You can fast for 40 days, you can sow seeds, you can cry out night and day. But if your heart resists obedience, the flow of heaven remains blocked. God does not respond to emotion. He responds to action that agrees with His word. Every time God speaks, His instruction carries a supply. The miracle is never in the request. It's always in the obedience. The difference between lack and abundance, between delay and acceleration, is often just one instruction obeyed or ignored. When Peter fished all night and caught nothing, he was tired, broke, and disappointed. But when Jesus told him to cast the net again, that word carried his miracle. Peter could have argued, he could have reasoned, but instead he said, "Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net." That nevertheless opened the floodgates of provision. One act of obedience turned an empty boat into an overflowing one. When you pray for financial increase, you must understand that God rarely rains money from heaven. He releases instructions to the obedient. Your miracle is hidden in your response. Obedience does not always make sense to the mind, but it always makes faith. God's instructions often sound illogical because they are designed to bypass human reasoning. He told a widow to give her last meal in famine, told Naaman to dip in a dirty river for healing, told Joshua to shout at walls for victory. Every one of these commands defied logic, yet each produced a supernatural outcome. When it comes to provision, obedience is not convenient, it is covenantal. The moment you choose to obey, even when it costs you comfort, you step into the realm of divine supply. There are believers who keep asking God for financial breakthrough, but never obey the small nudges He gives daily. The Spirit may tell you to give, to forgive, to bless someone, to shift careers, to start that idea, to stop worrying. But until you act, the flow remains hindered. Heaven's system operates on response. God speaks, you move. God commands, you obey. Every divine instruction is an open door disguised as a test of trust. The more you delay obedience, the longer the manifestation takes. The moment you move, the moment the provision begins to move toward you. Obedience requires faith because often the command comes before the supply. God said to Abraham, "Go to a land I will show you." Not, "I will show you." Gratitude is the language of increase. It is the invisible magnet that pulls multiplication out of heaven and into your life. When thanksgiving becomes your response to every situation, you position yourself for supernatural overflow. The prayer of thanksgiving is not a reaction after the blessing arrives, it is a declaration before it manifests. When Jesus stood before 5 loaves and 2 fishes, He did not complain about how small they were. He lifted them toward heaven and gave thanks. The moment He gave thanks, the miracle began. Multiplication started not in His hands, but in His heart. Gratitude transforms insufficiency into abundance because it shifts your focus from what is missing to who is faithful. There is a spiritual law that runs through Scripture. Whatever you thank God for increases, whatever you complain about decreases. Thanksgiving is not just good manners, it is a covenant principle. It is an act of faith that says, "God, I trust you enough to celebrate before I see the outcome." When you thank God in advance, you are proving that your confidence is not in the situation but in His promise. That is why Paul could say, "In everything give thanks." Not for everything, but in everything. Because thanksgiving is not determined by condition, it is determined by revelation. It is the awareness that God is still in control, even when the numbers don't add up. Many people pray for increase, but few understand that complaining cancels what prayer creates. You cannot murmur and multiply at the same time. The children of Israel saw miracles daily, yet their murmuring kept them wandering. Gratitude would have carried them swiftly into the promised land. Complaining focuses on what's wrong, but thanksgiving focuses on what's right with God. It opens your spiritual eyes to see abundance where others see emptiness. When you begin to live in continual gratitude, you will notice that doors begin to open, favor begins to follow you, and what used to be hard becomes effortless, because heaven responds to thankful hearts. When you lift your hands in gratitude, you are acknowledging that everything good in your life has come from God. You are saying, "Father, I recognize you as the source, and I honor you with my words." That acknowledgement is what invites more. Heaven never increases what man refuses to appreciate. When you thank God for what you already have, He trusts you with more. Gratitude is proof that you value the giver more than the gift. It is the humility that draws the abundance of grace. God resists the proud, but He pours out favor on the thankful. The prayer of thanksgiving does not depend on circumstances, it flows from revelation. Even in seasons of lack, gratitude keeps your faith alive. When Elijah prayed over the widow's little oil and flour, she did not curse what she had. She obeyed with a thankful heart, and the supply never ran dry. When Paul and Silas sang praises in prison, their chains fell off before their case was heard. Thanksgiving releases spiritual vibrations that shake foundations. It changes atmospheres. It silences the enemy. It turns night into morning. Gratitude must be practiced until it becomes your posture. It must flow out of your mouth before money flows into your life. Many people wait for their bank account to rise before they give thanks, but true faith gives thanks while the account is still empty. Gratitude is not denial, it is prophecy. When you thank God for what is coming, you are declaring that you already believe it is done. That kind of faith provokes manifestation. God always multiplies where He finds gratitude. Every time you pray, Father, thank you for meeting all my needs, even before they are met, you are activating heaven's abundance. You are declaring your trust in the unseen. Thanksgiving keeps your heart light, your mind peaceful, and your spirit open to direction. A complaining spirit cannot hear God clearly, but a thankful one discerns divine strategy. Sometimes God is ready to bless, but the heart must first be tuned to gratitude. Thanksgiving is that tuning. It brings your spirit into frequency with heaven's flow. You must understand that gratitude is warfare. It is not just an emotional expression. It is a weapon. When you thank God, you silence doubt, you resist fear, and you disarm the enemy's plan to discourage you. The enemy feeds on negativity, but he starves when you start to praise. Thanksgiving makes your spirit too bright for darkness to dwell. That is why Jesus could stand before a dead man's tomb and give thanks. Father, I thank you that you have heard me, he said, and Lazarus came forth. Gratitude raises dead things. It resurrects opportunities. It breathes life into empty situations. When you sit down to pray about your finances, start with thanksgiving. Don't begin by listing your needs. Begin by acknowledging God's past faithfulness. Say, Lord, I thank you for every bill you've paid, every door you've opened, every time you made a way when there was none. As you rehearse His goodness, faith begins to rise. You start to remember that He has never failed you before. That remembrance fuels expectation. Gratitude is memory in motion. It is the constant rehearsal of divine faithfulness. The more you remember, the more your faith multiplies, and the more heaven releases into your hands. Thanksgiving also positions you for stewardship. When you appreciate what you have, you handle it wisely. God does not multiply waste, He multiplies what is valued. Jesus told the disciples to gather the fragments after feeding the 5,000. Gratitude not only multiplies provision, it preserves it. A thankful person never loses what they have because they treat every blessing as sacred. Gratitude builds discipline, and discipline builds sustainability. The atmosphere of gratitude attracts creative ideas. When you thank God for what is already working in your life, your mind opens to see new possibilities. You begin to recognize opportunities that were hidden in plain sight. Divine ideas start to flow because your spirit is free from the fog of frustration. Many miss divine opportunities because they are too busy complaining about what is not working. Gratitude clears the eyes of the heart. It allows you to see the seeds of multiplication God has already placed within your reach. The more you practice thanksgiving, the more natural it becomes to you. It changes the way you talk. You stop saying, I can't afford this, and start saying, I thank God for provision. You stop saying, nothing ever works for me, and start declaring, all things are working together for my good. Gratitude shifts your vocabulary from defeat to dominion. Your words begin to create what your heart believes. Every thankful declaration becomes a seed planted in the soil of faith, and in due season that seed produces harvest. Gratitude also carries an atmosphere that people can feel. A thankful person draws favor, attracts partnerships, and opens hearts. People are drawn to those who radiate appreciation because gratitude mirrors God's own nature. It is the fragrance of faith. It turns ordinary moments into holy ground. When you live in gratitude, you live above offense, above bitterness, above competition. You no longer compare, you celebrate. And what you celebrate multiplies, so every day, before you ask, thank Him. Before you plan, praise Him. Before you calculate, worship Him. Before you count what's missing, count what's present. And as you do, you'll find that the more you thank Him, the more you'll have to thank Him for. Because thanksgiving keeps the flow of provision open. It is the riverbed through which heaven's abundance keeps running into your life.